Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you could all join us today, and welcome to Smart Talk, Visions of the Future. Today, we are joined by Adam Twersky, the founder of ImmersiveXR, which, among many other things, develops virtual and augmented reality, data and API integrations, and healthcare simulations and assessments. They are a team of futurists, designers, thinkers, and creators dedicated to the advancement and the adoption of immersive technologies. Adam is here today to discuss the intersection of extended reality, technology, and healthcare in the near and distant future. Adam has worked with the Science Center before, actually, and I personally got to try out his VR simulations when he joined us for an event last September. So I had a lot of fun then, and like all of you, I'm excited to learn more about what he has in store for us. So with that, I give you Adam.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending today. I want to, I guess, check. Are you able to see the slides yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. Let me pull that up. All right. How about now?
Yeah, looking good.
Perfect. So I'm going to go through today. I guess I'll get into this. The basic terms and concepts. I want us all to be on the same page. There's really a lot to know with this stuff, and it's growing all the time. So without knowing everybody's background who is here today, it's kind of hard to know how in depth to go. So I'll cover some basic stuff to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. Get into some current applications in these technologies and where it meets healthcare, some trends of healthcare, and then future applications. Because really, I want to give you an idea of what that future will be like. There's plenty of information on what's going on today, but I like to be more of the futurist mindset and really show where this stuff is headed. And I think it's very, very exciting. So hopefully you'll feel the same. At the end, we'll go through some questions and answers. If you have a question and you think it's timely and you put it in, Jake can always let me know and we can address it in the moment. But otherwise, we'll just do some Q&A at the end. Like Jake said, I am the founder of ImmersiveXR. I got into this 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, really just because I've always been very interested in technology. I wound up attending the Augmented World Expo in Silicon Valley in 2016, and I got to see really the beginning of modern virtual reality hardware and experiences and augmented reality, and just really I was amazed by it, and I saw how it's going to change the world. And it already is, and it will continue to. So I decided to get into this stuff. My background is business, but I taught myself software architecture. I can read computer code, and it's just because I have such a love for this stuff. I did hire a team, and we've built applications for McKinsey, the consulting company. A lot of other ones. People around the world have experienced our content on multiple continents. So it's been very exciting for me as an entrepreneur, and hopefully some of my experiences will help flesh this out. And if you have any questions at any point, after this presentation, you can feel free to reach out. You can contact Jake or reach me on LinkedIn, etc. So the basic terms I'm going to cover will be just augmented reality, virtual reality, extended or mixed reality, and spatial computing. There's a lot of these terms. One of the things about where we are is digital convergence. So I'll explain this more in a little bit, but all of these terms I think are pretty important to get us to where we're going to be moving. So let's see. Virtual reality, here's a standard definition. Computer-generated simulation of a three-dimensional image or environment that can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way. This is kind of important because the seemingly real or physical way, as time goes on, it's going to get tricky because the way that we experience reality is just electrical impulses in our brain, right? So as technology advances, we will be able to mimic those electrical impulses or read those electrical impulses. And again, I'll kind of cover that a little more later, but virtual reality ultimately is going to be where you are in a false environment and experience things as if it was real. People like to say it's like a dream. Augmented reality, on the other hand, is an environment the environment that you are in, but you see graphics superimposed within that environment. So you're not really leaving, you're bringing additional virtual content to you, whereas virtual reality, you are going somewhere else. For augmented reality, this is just kind of a standard thing in sports. They're superimposing that yellow line. They can superimpose other things into the field of view. So just giving an example of maybe how augmented reality was used previously, but now that there are real augmented reality glasses, the definition of real augmented reality is becoming more technical. Mixed reality would be a combination of different sensors, different senses in your experience. So instead of just looking at the content and interacting with it in one dimension, in this example, you have multiple sensory feedback. So we actually created this experience, and this is what Jake was talking about earlier. The user will put on a virtual reality headset. They put on real boxing gloves that have sensors on them, and they are physically punching that dummy. So you've got that tactile feedback of punching something, but what you see in the simulation is a robot, and you're actually smashing it to pieces. So people love this thing. It's great for stress relief. Women especially love it. I think they get more out of it than men do. It's really a neat thing. So that would be an example of mixed reality, adding senses. Now there's another alternate definition, which could be tied to what's called spatial computing. And that is where you can kind of flip between virtual reality or augmented reality, depending on the nature of the content. So either one, I think, works. And one of the issues in this field is that there's still not great accepted standards of definition because the technology is changing so rapidly. One kind of side note on that, I have a client who is in industry. They work in warehouses and manufacturing. So they call their product AR, and that's actually assisted reality. It has nothing really to do with visuals. They have one screen over their eye, and you can see content, but the content is not parented or connected to the real world experience. So just be aware of hearing different definitions and understanding that they may not be exactly what you think. Because again, this client is promoting their product as AR. It's not real AR in the real definition, but you know, I can only do so much. So again, just kind of touching on this, XR is that umbrella term. So AR, physical environment where you are, but enhanced with graphics. Virtual reality is the simulated environment that is interactive. It's not just being in a 360 video, it's actually being able to engage with the content. And then mixed reality, which would be some combination of the two or more. So I'll walk through how XR is kind of built and what goes into a good XR experience. First, you got planning. So just like a movie, you're going to storyboard things out. You need to understand what the goal is of the experience. So there can be a simulation for training. There can be a simulation for just trying to communicate ideas or some other thing that you need to communicate. It's just these technologies offer a more rich experience. So if you create a storyboard, it's one thing to look at a picture, one thing to watch a video, the next thing is actually interacting. Your brain kind of works differently. So the value of this stuff is, with my clients, if they want to convey something, then we sit down and figure out what is that story that's going to grab the user and really make it interesting so that they learn something. So once you've got the story built and you want to create the actual experience, you need some kind of graphics, motion graphics. There's going to be, if it's virtual reality, you need an environment. If it is augmented reality, you need the data of the environment, meaning you need to know where an object gets placed in a scene. If you got an empty room and you want to use an augmented reality experience to show all of the furniture in that empty room, then that you need to know where to, the system needs to know where to place those virtual objects. So again, you've got your environment or worldview, then you've got some kind of user interface, how to control. Do you have a menu? Do you have some other, like a virtual knob that you can turn in the experience? There's just got to be some way for that experience to be interactive. And you need that user interface for that. People and objects, miscellaneous data, how does an object change? What are the physics? If you take a glass of water in a virtual experience and you pour that glass of water, how does that look? What does that look like? How does that work? So there's a lot of programming that goes into this. Interactivity, so you've got all this logic, like I said, there's just tons and tons of code that goes into making one of these experiences. So the two parts is the visual stuff of what you see, and then the underlying data and logic of how it works. And then all the inputs. So when, if you press a button, that user input is going to have a certain effect. That's the most basic. So you've got these controllers, and you can press a button or move them in a certain position. You've got gaze-based controls, which could be sensors over your eyes that actually track your eye movement, and you can select things based on that. Like if you hold your gaze for 2 seconds, then it will select that button. But if you are just looking around normally, then it might just highlight something or look at it. So that's a really cool technology. There's voice controls. In our experiences, if you say return to main menu, then you'll return to the main menu. There's a lot of different ways to interact with this content. The more advanced stuff could be, gestures, biometrics. So having an experience that is driven by, if it's biometrics, it could be reading your heart rate and reacting in real time based upon the user feedback. It could be heart rate, temperature. Use your imagination. If we can sense it, then we can turn that data into an outcome. Neuro control interfaces are really cool. That's basically a brain-computer interface. So you read your brain signals, and that has an effect on something. We've gotten to the point, it's all very early and very experimental, but we can actually read the image that somebody is looking at. You can figure that out. They're doing that in universities, and it's just very exciting for this technology. And then all this stuff, again, is driven by algorithms, these models that are complex if-then statements. If this happens, if you're looking in this direction, if you're, if your heart rate goes above this certain level, all of that stuff can affect whatever happens in your experience. Hardware, obviously you need something to be able to engage with this content. So the computer or processor, if you have a heavy duty computer or PC, that's going to be able to run a lot better than something like a mobile headset. So for people out there who have done VR, if the virtual reality that you've done is something where you put your phone in, that's very weak. it's probably not a great experience. It's how I started and I got excited with it. But really, the really heavy duty virtual reality is something, if you have not had a chance to try out, you really should. So you need the computer for it. You need data sensors, because again, the sensors need to know what the 3D space is that you're dealing with. A lot of other things. There's gyroscopes. There's you know, how to measure 2 dimensions, 3-dimensional objects. Think about if you need to know what that room is. You know, in this sample, you see these boxes up here. This is an external sensor using infrared to figure out what's going on in here. So these headsets have sensors on them, and they're reading the waves coming from the infrared, and that calculation lets the system know where the user is or where the headset is, and it figures out where the rest of the body is. Same thing with the hand controllers. They're you know, reading that signal, and all of that is getting computed. And then sensory output devices are where you're you might feel something based on that. So there's haptic stuff where you can feel vibrations. You can have you know, audio effects, so you need some kind of listening device, and of course the screen for it. Hardware, just samples of hardware. Early on, you had the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift. The newest one that I've gotten to play with and that I have is the Oculus Quest. So that's a wireless unit. Very cool because it has what's called 6 DOF controllers, just like these, where 6 degrees of freedom. So you're able to actually move around wirelessly, and the controllers work independently. So going back to this picture, when you're in a 3D space, the system knows where you are within that space, and we can create games based on that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the other components would be the other effects. So you could have a let's show you this particle effects,
distortion and dissolve effects, customizable multicolored fireflies, gory goop effects, flying ice shards, and so much more, all beautifully exhibited in the cool stone hallways of Unity's brand new particle and effects pack. Download the pack from the asset store today.
So that's from Unity. There's 2 primary game engines. There's Unity and Unreal, and they have these, you know, packs that you can use. So it saves a lot of time in programming. You don't have to do everything from scratch. That's really nice. What that does, as far as the industry goes, is you've got these like kind of prefabricated lines of code essentially that you can run, and it makes it it's like more democratized. You can much more easily make an experience, which is great because there's, you know, more artists, etc., who are creating experiences. It also has a negative effect because now there's more junk available on app stores, etc. So it's a blessing and a curse, but it is getting easier to make these experiences. Now, analytics is the last part. So what I mean by the analytics is really the full data package, and there's so much data about everything. And as time goes on, there's going to be more sensors, more computing, and more ability to capture more data. So in this example, or in this image, we'll start at the most basic type of analytics, which would be descriptive. You know, it's measuring what is happening anywhere. All this would apply to not just technology, but, you know, you've got it in manufacturing, you've got it in healthcare. So descriptive is just trying to figure out what is going on. Then you've got the diagnostic. You know, how do we fix something that went wrong? How do we learn from it? Predictive would be trying to figure out what's going to happen, and then prescriptive would be really trying to control that future. So not just thinking about it, but actually controlling it. And so as there's more and more data, the machine learning algorithms can update themselves. So here's kind of the next line on that curve. So you've got that self-learning. So really, whether it's a doctor in in his office, or a computer programmer trying to figure out how to create an experience that develops or corrects itself over time. This is the process. So that AI and machine learning is really cool because you create a model, and then that model will pretty much self-correct over time. I'm going to go into some other concepts.
Move the pieces and collect your fee, but don't touch the sides.
Water on the knee. Automatic free. A river tune.
Operation.
So for anybody here who doesn't know the game Operation, that was an early commercial for the game. And the reason I'm talking about it is gamification itself has been around a long time. Obviously, that was for kids. You're not really learning how to be a doctor with that. But a lot of training simulations are based on gamification, which gives you feedback on different actions that you take, whether it's a physical gamified experience or a virtual gamified experience. There's a category called serious games, and that would be stuff that's used for training. There could be a flight simulator. This is one of the first really major gamified experiences that really helps people learn how to fly a plane. Here's a healthcare example. This company out of Philadelphia that created a gamified experience. They sell it to physical therapy places. So this actually reads some of your biometrics as you're running on a treadmill, and what you see in front of you is just a screen, but the faster your heart rate goes and the faster the treadmill goes, the faster the content in the experience goes. So it feels very immersive. And when they do stress tests with this, they actually, the patient gets has a better experience because it's not boring just running on a treadmill. Now your brain is occupied and you're not actually thinking about what's going on, you're thinking about the content. So that interactivity is really meaningful as it relates to healthcare, for sure. Next concept would be digital convergence. So all of technology is coming together, and you can get a little, there's like a fine line between esotericism or reality. But this term singularity is really kind of defining all of these technologies coming together where man and machine will merge. It's transhumanism, if you will. So this will be possible at some point, at least I believe it will. We can already hook up our brains to computers in different ways. It's very, very early, but if you've seen The Matrix, movies like that, it will be possible. It will continue to happen. And in order for that to happen, we just need more powerful computers, more data available to us, and knowing how to use that data. And in order to do so, there's these concepts or technologies of 5G and IoT. So in order to make use of all that data, we need to be able to transfer data. So the transfer of data rates is going to be limited by the technology used, when going from dial-up modems all the way to fiber optic cables. Internet of Things is the data that individual pieces of machinery generate. And when you plug it into the internet, you can do stuff. This example, it's a washing machine. It can tell you maybe if a filter is clogged and needs to get changed. They have smart refrigerators, they have smart everything. So all of this technology and data is coming together in digital convergence. But the technology currently isn't strong enough to support it. There's just too much data, the transfer speeds are too low. That's why 5G is going to really help. The transfer rates are just through the roof, and we're not done. 5G is just going to be one more step. I'm not going to bore you with really what it is, but that's why it's important. So now getting into some current applications. There's staff training, patient care, and interactions and general wellness. Those are the three elements that I'll focus on. Obviously, there's just kind of an infinite amount. So when it comes to training, there's a lot of companies working in this field. A great one would be Virtro. I happen to know them. I met the founder way back at that Augmented Reality Expo in 2016. We both went off, started our own companies, and they've done an incredible job in terms of simulations in different industries. This one happens to be practicing on patient care. So you go into a virtual reality experience, and you're trying to learn to be a nurse. You're going through a conversation, a dialogue with the patient, and they have this technology where you can just speak. The computer system understands what you're saying, and based on what you're saying, can give you a certain response. As this machine learning develops and continues to get better and better, there's going to be more opportunity to improve it. Think of Alexa or Google. All that stuff is based on the same underlying technology. Training, augmented reality training. So whether it's through a mobile device or a headset, the graphics will be connected to whatever the real world objects are, and can give you more information. So this is kind of interesting. I had a conversation with a someone on the board of a major healthcare chain, hospital chain, several years ago. And I was talking about how at some point doctors will be wearing augmented reality glasses to assist them with surgery. And she told me I was crazy. She said, no doctor's ever going to want something in front of their eyes while they're performing surgery. Well, go figure, it has been done, and more doctors are getting very excited about it. There's some challenges, which I'll talk about later, but it is a great application for this technology, because what you pull in and show the doctor can be the patient's own, real-time biometrics, all that data. Patient care is the next one. So I didn't cover projection mapping, but you'll see what it is here. Projection mapping is ultimately taking a projector and illuminating the content onto some surface, but it's actually mapping the contours of the surface. So it's not just a flat projection, it looks three-dimensional. It's just much more engaging. It's actually another way to experience virtual or augmented reality using this.
Here at Children's Hospital, we really focus on looking for those ways to distract kids during procedures. There's been a lot of research that that's the #1 way to reduce a child's anxiety and pain. 3D projection mapping allows us to take those flat, sterile hospital spaces and make them really different environments for kids to demo. It captures your visual senses immediately because it takes an environment and really transforms it. When you can capture more than just 1 or 2 senses, you really maximize the distraction effect. And also it's new, it's novel. It's something that kids and families haven't seen, but also for the therapeutic uses. In a treatment room, when you're having to do a procedure, creating that environment that allows them to escape. We use a lot of techniques such as guided imagery and things like that. And this allows us just that one more step of being able to provide that actual visual to go along with their guided imagery. While the story is in their head and it's unfolding, to be able to actually see it play out in front of them just adds that extra dimension to it. We could prompt them with, hey, do you want to take a hot air balloon ride? They may take it and incorporate their friends and their family and things that help them cope. There's amazing stories that kids will tell, and the more they get involved in their stories and with that visual image to help guide them, the less they're thinking about the fact that they're laying still and having to have a procedure done. It takes us to the.
So a couple things that are worth mentioning in there. The mindfulness element, being able to kind of take your mind off of what's going on in the actual real world. There's been some really cool studies about the value, the pain-killing value of providing someone with a simulation while they're either undergoing surgery or maybe it's just, you know, sitting there for a cancer treatment and wanting to take your mind off of what is actually happening. You know, same thing with dialysis. So for the patients to be able to be transported somewhere else, it is literally a great painkiller for them, and something that is going to continue to be explored. Another situation is I have a production partner, Dream Syndicate, and they have provided one for University of Pennsylvania. So cancer patients will go in there, and either before or after their visit, they can sit and go through this guided meditation, and the results and feedback that they've gotten is really incredible.
Next level.
And finally, in terms of current applications for general wellness, you've got you know, apps. We're all familiar with that stuff. So I'm going to talk more about this as far as the future applications. But for now, really, it's just it's supporting the idea that, you know, we really are kind of merging with computers. This is the first step, is just getting comfortable with the idea of relying on devices for our lives. Now, some current trends for healthcare that will support my kind of vision of that future. So going from fee-for-service to value-based model. You know, instead of just providing doctors the money for whatever visit they have, it's really about patient outcomes. So again, you're creating more of a feedback loop. It's not just, hey, here's your treatment and you're done. It's, hey, let me see the progress. So going back to that other, you know, that model about prescriptive analytics, et cetera, if you try and really complete that feedback loop, then the patient should remain healthier, and that's why the healthcare system is starting to shift to that. Underlying that is the use of big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and electronic medical records. So having everything in a database and being able to rely on that. Now, of course, it's very early with this, and so there's different competitors. There's no single electronic medical record database. So there's going to be a lot of redundancy as things start. But of course, as tech moves forward, things will get consolidated, and the convergence will happen. It'll pull in all of that stuff. So I'll talk about some of the considerations on that in a bit. Rising costs in healthcare, of course. Telehealth is big, especially with COVID, and FDA-approved apps. So the first FDA-approved video game was released recently. So all of this stuff is very exciting. It's going to make life more interesting, I think. It's going to make healthcare more interesting. You know, I like to compare it to fitness. I'm not someone who loves to go and sit and just, you know, throw weights up. That's not my idea of a fun workout. But when I was doing CrossFit, now that was exciting because it took my mind off really just sitting there and pushing weights. You're, you know, moving tires, you're running, and someone's telling you what to do. It's in a way gamified, and I think that makes life more fun overall. So now, future stuff. This is really the exciting part, I think. I'll go through the same 3 examples, but discuss the changes. So when it comes to staff training and evaluation, again, there's a lot of work being put into this, but you've got, you've got these simulations that can be used for either a med student or a doctor to run through these simulations. Well, as they go through the simulations, again, there's always data being captured. How long does it take them to do a certain action? If something changes in the simulation, are they going to be aware of that change? Did they catch it? Or if they caught it, how long did it take them to catch it? So you can really evaluate somebody in a better way than anything else, because the computer always knows. Again, it can look at where the doctor's eyes are looking. It could look at whether the eyes are getting dilated, and is the heart rate, is the person excited? Are they nervous? There's so much that you can figure out as as the tech advances and you're capturing all that data. But with all of that value comes the consideration of, okay, well, who owns that data? What are the privacy rights of the individual? So if you're a med student and you're going through a simulation and your scores are low, well, how does that information, who owns that information, and what could those effects be like? Because in that packet of information could be some biometrics. While you're going through that simulation and you have biometric feedback captured, well, what if you have heart arrhythmia? What if you've got other health issues that are identified through going through this simulation? And what are what are the concerns or risks of that data getting in the wrong hands or just being exposed? So you've got to think about the whole, the HIPAA issues with that. And yeah, so then you get to computer security, having good networking protections. Anytime you've got something connected to the internet, it has the ability to be hacked. So guarding information is very important. That's really just an unknown as time goes on. Patient care, interactions, and monitoring. So as more of these simulations are created, as the technology costs go down and more people can afford it, there's going to be a change to how we work. Right now, there are FDA-approved apps. Well, what about an FDA-approved virtual reality simulation? What about a virtual reality simulation that is going to be providing your doctor that information on your progress? So one example I can give is if you are in a pinball machine, right? Everything happens on a plane, and the ball comes down and the flippers go. So if you create a virtual reality simulation where you are inside a pinball machine and you're moving your limbs, as the flippers, that can be a gamified experience. And now if you add another dimension to that, you can control where the person's limbs need to go. We know what the maximum values are. We know what the human range of motion is. So as the person is in this experience doing this kind of game, you can control where you want their limbs to go. You can control, you can sense the range of motion that they have. Maybe if they're supposed to get to if their hand is supposed to get to a certain destination and they don't get there, if they stop short, then they have limited range of motion. So this is really cool because with all the censored data, the need to be physically with someone is lowered. So now you're increasing the access to care, because instead of having a physical therapist maybe drive in a rural area 45 minutes to go meet with someone, or vice versa, you can now just send this device and the person can use it. So if you're recovering from surgery and your doctor has prescribed this app and you're supposed to use it every day for 2 weeks, or 3 times a day for 2 weeks, the app is going to notify the doctor how much you've been using it, what's the progress that you're making, and the doctor can in real time make adjustments to that prescription. So I think that's one of the most fascinating applications of this, is just really being able to use the sensor data and the three-dimensional space in a way that we haven't been able to before. Another point of this that I would throw out is, so empathy is a big deal, and it's a big deal in healthcare. There's been, I guess, studies showing that doctors, I believe their empathy levels tend to coincide with their own race. So I've read studies that white doctors feel that Black patients experience pain less. They're not as sensitive to it. And so if you have some kind of virtual experience and you want to make the patient, kind of anonymize them through that virtual experience, then that might remove some of those, biases. And the next one, so with COVID here, I don't know if anyone has seen the Matt Damon movie, Contagion. So in Contagion, they talk about this stuff as well. Basically, if you're walking around with your augmented reality headset and you're looking at a crowd in front of you, and you can see the temperature that each person has, you can see who has a fever and potentially avoid them. But take it a step further, with all this image recognition, if you're walking around and your cameras are recognizing who is where, then the fact that you walk by, John Doe and see that they have a fever, somebody else does also. Well, now someone somewhere else is gonna, when they encounter John Doe, they would know ahead of time, before even seeing John Doe, that John Doe was approaching and could avoid them altogether. So there's so much value to this information that exists, but it could be used wrongly. So there's privacy concerns. What about John Doe? Maybe he doesn't want people to know that he's sick, or stuff like that. Currently, with old technology, when you go to the physician, you go to the doctor, you have an experience that is between the doctor and yourself, and your chart notes hold that, and you've got some level of privacy. When you walk out of the doctor's office, you essentially have anonymity, with your data. But as all these sensors increase and the amount of data captured is skyrocketing, and the data captured isn't going into your chart notes, but it's just being collected by whether it's Google or Amazon, Apple. Now there's all this data about you. It could be the size of you. It could notice changes in your weight, in your walking gait. There's so many different aspects, and we can really figure out, if somebody's gait has changed, there's going to be obviously some problem there. There's a reason why it has. So there's just a bunch of examples, and if you're in the healthcare field, I'm sure you can think of a lot more. So what is the risk of all of that data, and what's our right to privacy? If we don't want other people knowing that, is there any way to stop it? I would say at this point, the cat's out of the bag, and probably not, to be honest. So that's the rough overview. Again, I could go really long on any one of these subjects, but without knowing your background as an audience, it's really hard to do that. So I'd like to open it up for Q&A. I figured I'd leave some time to be able to do that. I think there's a small group of you here that you might have questions. So.
All right, thanks a lot, Adam.
Yeah.
That was awesome. So if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself, but if you prefer not to, you can also enter them into the chat. And while we're waiting for questions, I had one myself.
Sure.
So we're talking about, the future applications of VR and AR for, these medical situations. Do you know of any timeline, or maybe this will just be, your thoughts, a timeline of when we could see, simple VR technology in a regular doctor's office?
So like I said, at UPenn right now, they have one. I would say I'm pretty confident in saying that most mainstream or larger hospitals have some form of VR. I think AR is still, we're waiting a little bit. There would be applications of being able to see through AR a doctor that would be simulated, but if you're waiting in the doctor's office, maybe having some kind of consultation with a virtual avatar, or if you're sitting at home and you're doing telehealth, it wouldn't be too hard to be able to kind of see a 3D model of your doctor talking to you as a virtual avatar, but live tied to the doctor. There's also a way, again, as tech gets better and you've got your Alexa technology, to be able to have an artificial intelligence based conversation with a fake doctor. So they're called agents. So there would be this agent who is completely a computer algorithm that would be talking to you, but is able to use your actual patient notes or your information to give you correct answers. And that could all happen really without the doctor being involved. Once that agent is created, it would understand kind of what to say or do based on that algorithm, and tied into the patient's personal information.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah. Any hands raised?
Seeing any? Doesn't seem so. But Adam, if people did have questions, would it be all right if I shared any of your information? We do send a follow-up email.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to people. Kind of again, I do consulting, but or app development, etc. But always happy to kick around ideas, and this is what I do. It's what I love. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Oh, it seems Rochelle, we have a hand raised here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. You mentioned an avatar for doctors in their offices, but what about an avatar for patients? Because I don't know that I would be comfortable speaking to an avatar of the doctor. And yet, in some circumstances, especially during COVID when I'm home, I might prefer that the doctor not actually see me, but just hear me.
Right, exactly. So earlier I had mentioned that you might be able to do the remote telehealth. And so having that avatar technology is certainly doable. They already exist. Facebook's virtual reality software already accounts for avatars. So as a patient, just to have a telehealth conversation and have your body kind of digitally represented but anonymized, that is already doable. What's interesting would be, as tech gets more advanced, then that avatar can reflect more and more accuracy what you might be feeling or saying. So for instance, there's like sentiment analysis that can be done with artificial intelligence. So if you're using positive words, then the system knows that. So your avatar, if you're using positive words, might look different in a good way. So the doctor can actually read and understand. In addition to hearing your words, the doctor would be looking at an avatar that represents maybe more greenish hue, as opposed to if you're using negative words, you might look more red. Right. Or if you're saying, I've got this pain in my elbow and it's been radiating, up my shoulder into my back, the doctor would see that represented on your avatar as you're talking, just to help fulfill that communication. The more, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Obviously, you take it to a bigger degree. There's video, etc. So the more information that you can communicate visually, in addition to what you're hearing, the better.
And still
Thanks,
maintaining
Mom.
privacy. Right, and still maintaining privacy.
And still maintaining privacy, absolutely. But you know, that privacy is limited to how secure those systems are, and so there's a challenge. You know, hackers do what they do for a reason. So you know, what are the risks and considerations? It's a major issue, you know, that is discussed.
Great. Thank you.
All right, cool. Well, if we don't have any other questions here, you know, you can think it over, and if you do come up with anything you want to inquire about, feel free to contact Adam. As I mentioned, I'll be sharing his info in an email following this session. So
there is a question from Lee.
Sorry, Adam, I was using a reaction. I was giving you an applause. I was clapping because I enjoyed it. I apologize. I was actually trying to say thank you.
Thank you, Lee. So Lee is one of the founders of Virtro that I had mentioned earlier.
Oh,
but you shared a lot of information that was really valuable, so I appreciate it. Thanks, Adam.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. It's always fascinating to learn about this stuff, and you know, I encourage everyone to check out Immersive. And if you have yet to have, you know, any kind of virtual or augmented reality experience, and you have the opportunity, definitely check it out. I know a lot of people, when they see images, you know, it can kind of seem like, oh, this is like old PlayStation graphics. Like, how immersive could this be? But once you have that headset on, it's amazing how much you feel just completely planted in that reality. So, you know.
You know, there's one other thing I can mention as far as the future. So there's nanobot technology. So what that is these like microscopic, super small scale, essentially robots that can travel through the human body and affect change. So as tech advances, we're going to be able to get more and more data, which in theory, and I think also it's going to be reality soon. I'm aware of some companies that are actually working on it. A doctor, a surgeon, would be able to be in virtual reality and see what's happening in real time in the patient's body while doing surgery through robotics. So you've got, you know, some laparoscopic surgical devices, and they're operating based on the inputs from the surgeon, who is visually looking at not the patient, but you know what he's trying to work with inside the patient. All of that is really cool, but then there's considerations, because if something goes wrong, who's liable? Is it the doctor, or is it the people who made the algorithm? You know, how do you figure that out?
Gosh.
It's another aspect of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's exciting, but it also makes my hands sweat when I think about it.
Yeah, I understand why.
Yeah. It's great. Well, thank you again, Adam. And thank you everyone for joining here today. Keep an eye out for that email, and yeah, we'll see you at the next session.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.